While I was studying abroad, my guardians sold my laptop to cover my cousin's debt. You weren't using it anyway, right? Without saying a word, I took legal action. But there was something they didn't know yet. When the new owner tried to register it, then this happened. I, 22M, never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, 3 months after everything went down, still processing what happened. My parents died in a car accident when I was 16, and my aunt and uncle became my legal guardians. They seemed decent enough back then, letting me finish high school while living in their house with my cousin who was 2 years older than me. When I got accepted to study computer science abroad on a partial scholarship, they were supportive. At least, that's what I thought. The scholarship covered tuition and basic living expenses, but I had to work part-time jobs to afford anything extra. Before leaving, I saved up for 2 years to buy a high-end gaming laptop, a beast of a machine worth about $3,000. It wasn't just for gaming. I needed it for my programming courses, 3D modeling, and the freelance web development work I did to supplement my income. I left the laptop at their house because my dorm had decent computers, and I figured it would be safer there than risking damage during travel. Plus, I planned to use it during semester breaks when I came home. My aunt assured me it would stay in my old room, untouched. Everything seemed normal during my first year abroad. I video called them monthly, and they always asked about my studies. My cousin had graduated but was struggling to find steady work, bouncing between odd jobs. I felt bad for him, but I was focused on my own challenges, adapting to a new country, keeping up with coursework, and working 20 hours a week at a local tech repair shop. The first red flag came during winter break of my second year. I flew home excited to use my laptop for a personal project I'd been planning. When I went to my old room, the desk where I'd left it was empty. I found my aunt in the kitchen and asked where it was. She got this weird look on her face and told me my cousin had borrowed it for a job interview presentation. Something felt off about her explanation, but I didn't push it. When my cousin came home that evening, I asked him about it. He seemed nervous and said he'd return it the next day. The next day came and went. Then another. Every time I asked, there was a new excuse. The laptop was at a friend's house. He'd left it at work. It needed repairs. After a week of this runaround, I demanded the truth. That's when my uncle finally came clean. My cousin had racked up gambling debts, about $4,000 to some dangerous people who were making threats. They'd panicked and sold my laptop to a local computer store for $1,500 to make a partial payment. My uncle looked me straight in the eyes and said I wasn't using it anyway, so what was the big deal? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just about the money. Though losing $3,000 worth of equipment I'd worked 2 years to afford was devastating. It was about trust, respect, and the fact that they'd stolen from me to cover my cousin's irresponsible choices. My aunt tried to play peacemaker, promising they'd pay me back gradually. My uncle got defensive, saying I should be grateful for everything they'd done for me over the years, that family helps family. My cousin just sat there looking ashamed, but not saying a word. I told them I wanted the laptop back or full compensation immediately. My uncle laughed and said they didn't have that kind of money lying around, that I needed to be more understanding. That's when I realized they never intended to make this right. I spent the rest of my break researching my options. I discovered that since I was over 18 and the laptop was legally mine, what they'd done constituted theft. I also learned that as my former guardians, they had a fiduciary duty that they'd violated. But I decided to give them one more chance. Before flying back to university, I sat them down and explained calmly that I needed either the laptop returned or $3,000 compensation within 60 days. I wasn't asking for interest or damages, just what was rightfully mine. My uncle scoffed and said I was being dramatic, that I should focus on my studies instead of material possessions. That was their final mistake. Back at university, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in family law and theft cases. I explained the situation, provided documentation of the laptop's purchase, and detailed the timeline of events. The lawyer was confident we had a strong case for both theft and breach of fiduciary duty. But here's what they didn't know, and what would make this whole situation much worse for them. When I bought that laptop, I'd been paranoid about theft. So I'd installed tracking software that would activate if anyone tried to register the device with a new user account or connect it to the internet after a factory reset. The software was designed to be nearly impossible to detect or remove without specialized knowledge. I'd also engraved my name and student ID number inside the battery compartment, something most people wouldn't think to check. Plus, I had the original receipt, warranty information, and even photos of the laptop's unique configuration and the custom stickers I'd put on it. The lawyer filed a civil lawsuit against my aunt and uncle for theft, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. We demanded the return of the laptop or compensation of $3,000, plus legal fees and damages for emotional distress. My aunt called me crying when they received the legal papers. She begged me to drop the case, saying it would destroy their family's reputation. She promised they'd find a way to pay me back if I just gave them more time. I told her they'd had their chance to do the right thing. They chose to dismiss my concerns and treat me like I was being unreasonable for wanting my own property back. Now it was out of my hands. My uncle called next, furious. He accused me of being ungrateful and vindictive, said I was destroying the family over a stupid computer. He threatened to cut off all contact, as if that was supposed to scare me. I reminded him that he'd already destroyed our relationship when he decided to steal from me. The real drama started 2 weeks later. The person who'd bought my laptop from the computer store, a college student looking for a good deal on a gaming setup, tried to register it for warranty service. That's when my tracking software activated and sent me an alert with the laptop's current location and IP address. I immediately contacted my lawyer with this information. We reached out to the current owner, explained the situation, and provided proof that the laptop was stolen property. The student was horrified to learn he'd unknowingly purchased stolen goods and agreed to cooperate fully. This gave us leverage we hadn't expected. Not only could we prove the laptop was mine, but we now had evidence of exactly when and where it was sold, plus a cooperative witness who could testify about the circumstances of the purchase. The computer store's records showed that my uncle had sold the laptop, claiming it belonged to his nephew, who'd given him permission. The store owner remembered the transaction because my uncle had seemed nervous and accepted a lowball offer without negotiating. Armed with this evidence, my lawyer contacted my aunt and uncle's attorney. Yes, they'd finally hired one, and presented our case. We had documentation proving ownership, witness testimony, store records, and even digital evidence from the tracking software. Their lawyer advised them to settle immediately, but my uncle's pride wouldn't let him admit defeat that easily. He instructed his lawyer to argue that as my former guardian, he'd had the right to make decisions about my property. This was a huge mistake that made their legal position much worse. The judge was not sympathetic to this argument. During the preliminary hearing, she made it clear that guardianship doesn't give someone the right to steal from their ward, especially after the ward reaches legal adulthood. She also noted that selling someone's property to cover another person's gambling debts was particularly egregious. Realizing how bad things looked, my aunt and uncle finally agreed to settle. But by then, the legal fees had mounted, and they were facing additional charges for filing frivolous defenses. The final settlement required them to pay me $4,000, the original value of the laptop, plus legal fees and damages. They also had to cover the cost of returning the laptop to me, though by then I didn't really want it back. The whole situation had soured my feelings about the device. But the story doesn't end there. Update 1. The settlement payment was supposed to come in 2 installments over 60 days. The first payment arrived on time, but the second one didn't. When I contacted their lawyer, I learned that my uncle had been fired from his job. Apparently, word of the lawsuit had gotten around their small town, and his employer, a family-owned business that valued reputation, decided they didn't want someone associated with theft working for them. My cousin's gambling debts had also gotten worse. The partial payment they'd made using money from selling my laptop had only bought him temporary relief. The people he owed money to had increased the debt with interest and penalties, and now they were threatening both him and his parents. My aunt called me in tears, begging me to accept partial payment and forgive the rest. She said they were facing financial ruin and might lose their house. Part of me felt bad for her. She'd always been kinder than my uncle, but I remembered how they'd dismissed my concerns when I was the one being wronged. I told her I'd consider a payment plan if they could demonstrate good faith, but I wasn't going to just forgive the debt. They'd made their choices, and actions have consequences. Update 2. 3 weeks after the missed payment, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the college student who'd bought my laptop. He told me something interesting. My cousin had contacted him directly, trying to buy the laptop back. Apparently, my cousin had some delusional idea that if he could get the laptop back and return it to me, I'd drop the lawsuit and forgive the debt. He'd offered the student $2,000 for a laptop the student had paid $1,500 for. The student had refused and reported the contact to my lawyer, as he'd been instructed to do. This gave us evidence that my family was trying to interfere with the legal process, which could have resulted in additional charges. When confronted with this evidence, my uncle finally broke down and admitted they'd been hoping to manipulate the situation. He'd convinced my cousin that I was just being spiteful and would back down if they could find a way to return the laptop. This revelation made me realize how little they understood about what they'd done wrong. They still thought this was about the laptop itself, not about trust, respect, and taking responsibility for their actions. Update 3. The final resolution came 4 months after I'd filed the lawsuit. My aunt and uncle had to take out a loan against their house to pay the settlement. My uncle found a new job, but at significantly lower pay. My cousin had to move back in with them because he couldn't afford his own place anymore. I received the full settlement amount, plus additional compensation for the delayed payment. The laptop was returned to me, though I ended up selling it and using the money to upgrade my setup with newer equipment. The most satisfying part wasn't the money, it was the vindication. For months, they treated me like I was being unreasonable and ungrateful. The legal process proved that I'd been right to stand up for myself. My aunt still sends me occasional messages asking about my studies and trying to maintain some kind of relationship. I respond politely but briefly. My uncle and cousin haven't contacted me at all, which is fine by me. The whole experience taught me valuable lessons about setting boundaries and standing up for myself. It also showed me that sometimes people you trust will disappoint you in ways you never expected, but that doesn't mean you have to accept being treated poorly. I'm doing well in my studies now, working on my final year project and preparing for graduation. I've got job interviews lined up with several tech companies, and my freelance work has grown into a small but profitable side business. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have been more understanding about their financial situation. But then I remember how they dismissed my concerns, how they tried to make me feel guilty for wanting my own property back, and how they never once genuinely apologized for what they'd done. They taught me that family isn't just about blood relations. It's about respect, trust, and treating each other with dignity. When they violated that trust, they stopped being family in any meaningful sense. I'm building my own life now, surrounded by friends who respect me and professors who value my work. I don't need people in my life who think they can take advantage of me and then make me feel bad for standing up for myself. The laptop saga is over, but the lessons I learned from it will stay with me forever. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is refuse to be a victim, even when, especially when, the people wronging you expect you to just accept it and move on.